This lesson is going to look at solving quadratic equations in an easier method than graphing. The first method that we're looking at is the square root method. The square root method involves doing exactly what the method's called, taking the square root. So if we have a simple quadratic equation like the one you see there, x squared equals 64, I can unsquare it or solve for x by taking the square root of each side. So I want to take the square root of x squared, and I want to take the square root of 64. The square root and the square sign cancel each other out, so I'm left with x, and then the square root of 64 is 8. But remember, as we have discussed before, there are two numbers that multiply by themselves to make 64. That would be 8 times 8 and negative 8 times negative 8. So our answer is x equals plus or minus 8. Let's take a look using the square root method at a little bit more involved of an equation. So I have this time x squared minus 49 equals 0. In order to take the square root, that should be the last step that you do. So you need to isolate your square first. So I need to get the x squared on its own side of the equation. So to do that, I need to move the minus 49 to the other side by adding 49 to both sides of the equation. Minus 49 plus 49 gives me 0, so they cancel out. I'm left with x squared equals 0 plus 49, or 49. I can now unsquare it by taking the square root of each side. So I can take the square root of x squared and the square root of 49. The square root and the square cancel each other out again, so I'm left with x. The square root of 49 is 7. And remember, we need to include both the positive and the negative version. So my answer is x equals plus or minus 7. Then I need to look at this quadratic equation. Now I have two things that I need to get rid of before I can do the square root. So I first need to get rid of the minus 6. So I want to add 6 to both sides. Minus 6 plus 6 give me 0. So I'm left with 2x squared equals 0 plus 6, which is 6. I then need to take both sides and get rid of the 2. So I need both sides and divide it by 2. The two 2's cancel each other out, and I'm left with x squared equals 2 divided by 6, or 6 divided by 2, which is 3. Now, I have to take the square root of both sides, so I have square root of x squared and the square root of 3. The square root and the square cancel each other out, so I'm left with x. The square root of 3 I could not take the square root of, so my answer is x equals positive and negative square root of 3. Let's take a look at one that's very similar to what we just did. So I need to isolate my square, so I have to add 24 to both sides. The minus 24 plus 24 cancel each other out, so I'm left with 2x squared equals 24. I then need to divide both sides by 2. Now I have my x squared isolated, and 24 divided by 2 is 12. So then I need to take the square root of both sides, the square root of x squared and the square root of 12. Square root and square cancel each other out. I'm left with x equals positive and negative square root of 12. But with the square root of 12, I can simplify it. If I have just the square root of 12, that is the same thing as saying the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. 4 being the biggest perfect square that goes equally into 12. So the square root of 4 I can do is 2, and then I can't do the square root of 3, so the square root of 12 simplifies to 2 square roots of 3. So my answer is x equals plus or minus 2 square roots of 3.